Buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into the crazy world of the housing market. And let me tell you, things are getting wild out there. From HOAs with more power than you might realize, to insurance costs that are, well, skyrocketing. And we'll even touch on a lawsuit that's alleging a housing cartel. You really can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these seemingly separate issues all end up tangled together. Homeowners and renters, insurance companies, developers, they're all part of this giant puzzle, and the stakes are higher than ever these days.
Let's jump right in and start with HOAs. Everyone's heard the horror stories, but honestly, how much power do these organizations really have?
It's a good question. A lot of people don't realize that HOAs essentially function as mini governments for your neighborhood. They can set rules, collect fees, and even impose some pretty hefty fines. The idea is to maintain property values and keep things harmonious. But the reality can be a lot messier.
Yeah, tell me about it. We actually spoke to a family, the unethical. They got caught up in this decade-long legal battle with their HOA. Racked up over $12,000 in fines and legal fees just trying to get them to listen. It seems like no matter what they did, they couldn't get a straight answer or a fair resolution. It really makes you wonder, how do you even protect yourself from that kind of situation?
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand what you're getting into before buying in an HOA community. The CC&Rs are key.
CC&Rs? What are those, some kind of secret society?
Aha. Not quite. They stand for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Basically, it's the HOA's rulebook. It outlines everything you can and can't do.
So they can really dictate everything from, like, what color you paint your front door to whether you can park your boat in your own driveway.
Exactly. And the power dynamic can get tricky because initially the developer holds most of the cards. But once a certain percentage of homes are sold, the control shifts to the residents.
So it's like you're signing a treaty with the HOA. What should people look out for to avoid any nasty surprises?
That's a great way to put it. Definitely watch out for any vague language or restrictions that seem overly broad or unreasonable. Pay close attention to how disputes are handled and what kind of authority the HOA board has. Remember, at the end of the day, you're entering into a contract with the HOA, so you need to understand the terms before you sign on the dotted line.
So basically, do your homework before falling in love with that house with the white picket fence. But I'm curious, do HOAs always guarantee higher property values? I've heard conflicting things.
It's a good question, and the research is mixed. Some studies suggest HOAs can boost property values, while others say the opposite. The Anastrosas believe their property value increased because of the neighborhood itself, not because of the HOA, so it really seems to depend on the specific community and how well the HOA is managed.
So it's not a surefire win for homeowners. What about government oversight? It seems like HOAs have a lot of power, but who's keeping them in check?
That's a major concern. Honestly, in many states, there's very little government oversight of HOAs, which leaves homeowners with few options if things go wrong. Some states are pushing for stronger regulations and even an ombudsman to mediate disputes and protect homeowners' rights.
Well, it definitely sounds like buyer beware when it comes to HOAs.
Yeah.
Do your research, understand the rules, and be ready to stand up for yourself if needed. All right, let's move on to another challenge facing homeowners, the rising cost of insurance. It's a crisis that's hitting people hard, and we have Darlene's story to illustrate just how tough it can be.
Darlene, she loved her home. She had horses, a beautiful hand-painted mural on her fence, years of memories there. After 18 years with the same insurance company, she got a non-renewal notice. And just like that, her dream home turned into a financial nightmare.
And I can't believe this. She was quoted a 6-fold increase for her annual premium. It wasn't even because she filed a claim. The insurer just decided her property was too risky.
It's unfortunately a trend we're seeing all over the country. Insurers are pulling out of high-risk areas, and premiums are through the roof for those who can still get coverage. Climate change is a huge factor. Insurers are facing mounting losses from wildfires, floods, and other natural disasters.
So it's not just bad luck. It's a changing world, making certain areas just too expensive to insure. But I understand climate change isn't the only factor. What else is contributing to this insurance crisis?
Right, so you have inflation driving up the cost of rebuilding, and then regulations in some states can limit how much insurers can raise rates, even if the risk is going up. It's called premium suppression. And it can create a situation where insurance seems artificially affordable, masking the true cost of the risk.
So like if your car insurance stayed the same, even though you started driving more miles in a high-risk area, eventually the insurance company wouldn't be able to cover the increased risk of accidents.
Exactly. When insurers can't charge rates that reflect the actual risk, they either have to withdraw from the market or they become financially unstable, and ultimately that hurts consumers.
Makes sense. So what options do homeowners like Darlene even have when they're hit with these skyrocketing insurance costs?
Well, there are alternatives like residual markets, excess markets, and government-assisted insurance programs, but they usually come with higher cost limited coverage. And navigating them can be a real headache. In Darlene's case, she was told the state's FAIR plan, which is meant to be a safety net, would be incredibly expensive and offer very little protection.
It's a tough situation. Deemed too risky for standard insurance, but can't afford the alternatives. What kind of impact is this insurance crisis having on the housing market as a whole?
The ripple effects are significant. As insurance costs go up, so do the overall costs of homeownership. This could potentially lead to declining property values, especially in high-risk areas. It could even slow down economic activity. Remember, housing makes up a big chunk of the U.S. GDP, so this problem goes way beyond individual homeowners.
It's a sobering thought, and as climate change keeps unfolding, this is only going to get more intense. We need solutions and
You're right. Proactive risk management is key. This means things like strengthening building codes, creating defensible spaces around homes to reduce wildfire risk, and even considering managed retreat from areas that are simply becoming too dangerous to live in. There are some positive examples out there, like Alabama's grant program for resilience upgrades. It helps homeowners make their properties more resistant to natural disasters.
That's encouraging. A reminder that we're not completely powerless in the face of these challenges. Okay, so we've talked about homeowners facing these rising insurance costs, but let's shift gears now and talk about renters. They're also feeling the squeeze in today's market. And there's this lawsuit that's making some pretty serious allegations. It claims landlords are using sophisticated software to inflate rents.
This case filed by the D.C. Attorney General is really interesting. They're essentially accusing a company called RealPage of facilitating a housing cartel.
A cartel, like something out of a movie about drug lords. How does that even work with landlords?
Right. So RealPage provides software to landlords that uses algorithms to recommend rental prices. Basically, it calculates what they consider the perfect rent based on a ton of factors: location, amenities, market trends, all that stuff. The problem is the lawsuit claims landlords are basically surrendering their pricing power to this software, leading to rents that are artificially inflated.
Wait, so instead of setting prices based on, supply and demand and actual market factors, landlords are just blindly following what this algorithm tells them to do. Doesn't that seem a little unethical?
The D.C. Attorney General thinks so. They argue that landlords aren't independently determining rents, but rather colluding to fix prices on a massive scale, and that violates antitrust laws.
And we've also heard from tenants who say this software takes the human element out of the equation. They feel like they're being treated as data points, not as people.
It's true, and it raises some really important questions about the role of technology in our lives. While technology can be incredibly useful, it can also be misused, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as housing.
So what's RealPage's defense in all this?
They maintain that their software simply provides data-driven insights to help landlords make informed decisions. They say landlords are under no obligation to follow their recommendations, and that the algorithm can also suggest lowering prices in certain situations.
But if that's the case, why are so many landlords allegedly following these recommendations so closely?
That's the crux of the issue. The lawsuit claims that the agreements between RealPage and these landlords actually compel them to follow the software's suggestions, and the Attorney General alleges landlords are adhering to these recommendations over 90% of the time, which raises concerns about whether they're truly exercising independent judgment.
Yeah, that's a pretty staggering statistic. Of course, we also have the issue of supply and demand. In many areas, new construction rates are lagging behind demand, which gives landlords even more power to set prices.
It's a tough situation for renters. They're facing bidding wars, long wait lists, and sky-high rents.
We spoke to a woman named Rita Botello. She was priced out of her apartment after 20 years, forced to leave her community and start all over.
It's heartbreaking, and it's a reminder that behind all these market forces and legal battles are real people whose lives are being upended.
What are the potential outcomes of this lawsuit against RealPage? Could it actually change how rents are set in the future?
Well, the lawsuit is seeking to stop this practice, establish oversight of these landlords, and most importantly, secure financial restitution for tenants who were overcharged. If it's successful, it could set a precedent for regulating the use of this type of software and potentially shift the balance of power back towards renters.
That would be a huge win for tenants' rights. But I also read that this type of revenue management software is being used in other industries, like hotels, airlines, even grocery stores. Makes you wonder how much control we want algorithms to have over our lives.
It's a debate we need to have. As technology keeps advancing, we need to make sure it's being used responsibly and ethically, especially when it comes to essential needs like housing.
It's definitely a lot to think about. We've covered a lot today. From the power of HOAs to the insurance crisis, and now this fascinating lawsuit against RealPage. What are some of the key takeaways you hope people are walking away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the housing market is facing unprecedented challenges on multiple fronts. We need more transparency and accountability from HOAs. We need innovative solutions to address the insurance crisis, and we need to be vigilant about the potential misuse of technology. These are all complex, interconnected issues, and it's important to understand how they impact everyone, whether you're a homeowner, a renter, or just someone who cares about the future of our communities.
It's a lot to digest. But I think these are conversations we need to be having, and I hope our listeners will join us in continuing to explore these issues and search for solutions. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll be back soon with more insights and discussions on the ever-evolving world of housing.
We've talked about the challenges homeowners and renters are facing, but what about the people who build the houses in the first place? Developers play a huge role in shaping the housing landscape, and their interests don't always align with the needs of individuals or communities.
Right. It's like they're trying to balance a lot of different things. Providing housing, making a profit, meeting market demands, and sometimes it feels like those things are at odds with each other.
It's true. Developers are businesses at the end of the day. They respond to incentives, and sometimes those short-term gains can have long-term consequences for affordability and sustainability.
We've seen that with the rise of HOAs, right? Developers love them because they can add a premium to the price of the homes. But as we discussed, they can also become a real headache for homeowners down the line.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
So it's not just about building more houses, it's about building the right kinds of houses in the right places and with the right structures in place to protect homeowners. Speaking of which, what about the role of government policies? They must have a huge impact on the housing market, too.
Oh, absolutely. Government policies play a crucial role in shaping the housing market, for better or worse. Zoning laws, building codes, tax incentives, federal housing programs, they all influence what gets built, where it gets built, and who can afford to live there.
So it's not just the free market at play here. The government has a big hand in shaping things. What kind of policies do you think would help create a more equitable and sustainable housing market?
Well, for starters, we need policies that encourage a wider variety of housing options, not just single-family homes, but also apartments, townhouses, co-housing communities. We need a mix, and that means tackling exclusionary zoning practices, which often prevent affordable housing from being built in certain neighborhoods.
It's like those zoning laws are designed to keep certain people out.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that way. We need to move away from that mindset and promote mixed-income neighborhoods where people from all walks of life can live together.
It sounds like we need a more holistic approach to housing policy, one that considers the needs of different communities and income levels.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. We need to think outside the box, experiment with different approaches, and be willing to challenge the status quo.
Challenge the status quo. I like that. But policy changes can take a long time. And people are struggling right now. What can individuals do to make a difference in their own communities?
There's so much you can do. First and foremost, stay informed. Educate yourself about the issues facing your local housing market. Read articles, attend community meetings, follow local advocacy groups. Get involved in the conversation.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand these complex issues, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for change.
Exactly. And once you're informed, share that knowledge with others. Talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors about these issues. Write to your elected officials and let them know that housing affordability is important to you.
So many people feel powerless when it comes to these big systemic problems. You're saying that individual voices can actually make a difference?
Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of collective action. When enough people speak up and demand change, it's hard to ignore. Get involved with local organizations working on housing issues. Volunteer your time. Donate to causes you believe in. Use your voice to advocate for policies that promote affordability and sustainability.
It's inspiring to hear about people like Matt, who didn't just complain about his HOA. He actually ran for the board and is now working to make things better.
Exactly. His story is a great example of how we can all create positive change, even at the local level. And you don't have to do it alone. There are so many incredible organizations and individuals working on these issues. Find your people, connect with them, join the movement.
It's about shifting from competition to collaboration.
Right.
Recognizing that we're all in this together. And by working together, we can create a housing system that benefits everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. There's a great quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Such a powerful quote. It's a good reminder that even when things feel overwhelming, we can still make a difference. We've talked about the challenges, the policies, the individual actions we can take. But what about solutions? What are some of the innovative approaches that are already out there, giving us hope for a better housing future?
This is where things get really exciting. We're starting to see a shift away from traditional models of housing development and towards more creative and collaborative approaches. Think co-housing communities, micro-apartments, 3D printed homes. The possibilities are expanding.
I've been reading about these new models, and they sound fascinating. It's not just about building more, it's about rethinking what housing can be.
Exactly. We're seeing a convergence of design technology and social consciousness. Architects are incorporating sustainable materials and energy-efficient features, creating homes that are beautiful, functional, and good for the environment. And technology is playing a role too, connecting homeowners and renters, streamlining the building process, making it easier to find affordable options. It feels like we're on the verge of a major transformation in the housing market.
And it's not just happening in big cities. These innovations are taking root in rural areas and small towns as well. There's a renewed interest in community land trusts, cooperative housing models, approaches that prioritize affordability and community ownership.
It's encouraging to see these grassroots efforts gaining traction. Like, the movement for housing justice is finally reaching a tipping point.
People are recognizing that housing is a fundamental human right, and they're demanding solutions that are equitable, sustainable, and accessible to all.
It's amazing to see people from all walks of life coming together to fight for this cause. Tenants, homeowners, developers, policymakers, activists, all united by this shared vision of a better future.
It's powerful, a reminder that change is possible when we come together with a shared vision and commitment.
It all comes back to that idea of interconnectedness, right? Recognizing that we all have a stake in this, and that the well-being of our communities depends on the well-being of all its members.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond the transactional nature of housing and embracing its deeper social and human dimensions.
So well said. And on that note, I think it's important to talk about something that often gets overlooked in these conversations: the psychological and emotional impact of housing instability. We've talked about the financial burdens and the complex regulations, but what about the toll that housing insecurity takes on people's mental and emotional health?
That's such a crucial aspect of this crisis, and one that deserves much more attention. The stress, the anxiety, the fear of not knowing where you're going to sleep, or if you'll be able to keep a roof over your head. It can have profound and lasting consequences for individuals and families.
It's hard to even imagine what that must be like, to live with that constant uncertainty and fear.
We've heard stories of families living in overcrowded apartments, constantly worried about eviction. We've seen seniors who are priced out of their homes, forced to leave their communities, and we've witnessed the trauma of those who have lost their homes to foreclosure or natural disasters. It takes a huge toll.
It's a reminder that housing is more than just bricks and mortar. It's about security, stability, a sense of belonging. When those basic needs are met, people can thrive. But when housing becomes a source of stress and uncertainty, it can undermine their well-being and create a cycle of disadvantage.
You've put it perfectly. Secure, affordable housing is not just a necessity, it's a fundamental human right.
It's about recognizing that everyone deserves a place to call home, a place where they feel safe and supported.
A place where they can build a life.
Exactly. When you think about it, it really is heartbreaking to hear about the struggles people are facing just to have a roof over their heads.
It is, and we often focus on the numbers and the policies, but behind those statistics are real people whose lives are being turned upside down by this crisis.
It's like we were saying earlier, housing is more than just bricks and mortar. It's a foundation, it's security, it's a sense of belonging. And when that foundation is threatened, it affects every aspect of your life.
Absolutely. It impacts your mental health, your relationships, your ability to work, your sense of hope for the future. We need to be doing everything we can to support people who are struggling, whether it's expanding access to affordable housing or providing essential services like healthcare and childcare.
When we started this deep dive, I have to admit I was feeling a little overwhelmed by the complexity of the housing market. But hearing about all the people who are working to make a difference, it does give me hope. There are grassroots organizers, innovative developers, policymakers who are really pushing for change.
There is a growing movement, a real sense of urgency around this issue. People are recognizing that housing is a human right, and they're demanding action.
And what I find so inspiring is that this movement is bringing people together from all walks of life. It's not just tenants versus landlords or homeowners versus developers. It's a collective recognition that we need to work together to create a system that benefits everyone.
The power of storytelling is so important in this movement. It helps us connect with the human side of the crisis.
Like the stories we've heard from Darlene, Rita, and Matt, they remind us that behind all the data and policy debates are real people whose lives are being deeply affected.
Those stories have the power to inspire action. They show us that even small acts of compassion and solidarity can make a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what's the next step for someone who's listening to this conversation and feeling moved to make a difference?
Well, I think the first step is to simply ask yourself, what can I do right here, right now? Maybe it's contacting your elected officials and urging them to support affordable housing initiatives. Or maybe it's volunteering at a local homeless shelter or donating to an organization working on housing justice.
Or even just having conversations with your friends and family about these issues, raising awareness and encouraging others to get involved.
Exactly. Every action, no matter how small, makes a difference. And remember, you don't have to be an expert or have a lot of money or free time to contribute. The most important thing is to show up, to be present, to lend your voice and your energy to the cause.
You know, throughout this conversation, we've talked about the challenges, the solutions, the inspiring stories of people making a difference. But I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What if instead of seeing housing as a problem to be solved, we reimagined it as a canvas for possibility?
Wow, that's a beautiful way to frame it.
Instead of just focusing on fixing what's broken, what if we ask ourselves, what kind of housing future do we want to create? What kind of communities do we want to live in?
I love that. It opens up so many possibilities.
Imagine communities designed around shared green spaces, where neighbors can connect and support each other.
Imagine homes built with sustainable materials, powered by renewable energy, designed to foster well-being.
Imagine a housing system that's flexible and responsive to the diverse needs of our communities, where everyone has the opportunity to live in a place that truly feels like home.
It's a beautiful vision, and it's achievable if we work together.
So let's embrace this challenge, this opportunity, this canvas of possibility. Let's ask ourselves, what kind of housing future do we want to create? And then let's work together with courage, compassion, and creativity to make that vision a reality.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something and been inspired and are ready to get involved.
As remember, the future of housing is in our hands. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep believing in the power of possibility.